Hey, what's going on? Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com. Flying solo on this week's Goulet Q&A. This is episode number 39. It's an open forum this week, so I'm just taking all kinds of questions from anybody who wants to ask me basically anything, but mainly pen stuff. So last week I shot a really long Q&A with Rachel. It was great. We had a lot of fun doing it, changed locations, switched sides from where we normally sit on each other, but this week we're back to just me. So I'm sorry. I will try to get myself on tangents since I don't have Rachel here to do that for me. But it was a lot of fun. I love having her on. The dynamic that her and I have is obviously something that's really kind of unique and special. She is my wife, so we work together every day, and we started this business together, and it's just really cool to get to do stuff like that with each other. So she is actually going to be coming back next week because well, I don't know. I kind of like it. I like doing them together. I like kind of doing them separate every now and then. So we're probably going to end up doing it. Her and I were talking. It's like, should she do it every week? I don't know. Maybe not. But we would like to have her on. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to end up kind of mixing it up. I don't know if it's going to be like every other week specifically, but really kind of depending on the topics and the questions that we get, we may have her dive in here and there and so on. So, just kind of mix things up, keep them fresh every now and then, because kind of done a lot of these things now, and just don't want to keep you bored. So that said, in the last week or so, we have finally released our values, the Goulet Pen Company values, mission statement, purpose, vision, and they have been very well received so far. I'm recording this video now as of Thursday morning, so I just released them about 20 hours ago or so, and it's been awesome. Gotten so much great feedback. Really is just awesome, and it's been a really involved process that's taken about 14 months total since when we started and kind of decided, okay, we need to clarify these things. Been through all kinds of adventures going through this process, but the last 2 months really has been very, very intensely focused on clarifying our values, mission, all that kind of stuff. And it really wasn't even so much like a goal setting thing. It was really more of just kind of defining the culture that we already have here. So every single person in our company was intimately involved with the clarification of what our values actually are, what it really means to be successful here at Goulet. And now we're at the point that we've clarified it. We actually finalized it, about 3 weeks ago, but we've been working on doing the video, finalizing things, getting the drawings up on the page. If you go to the About Us page and you click on Our Why, you're going to see all the stuff there. So I really encourage you to check it out if you haven't seen it already. It's really kind of the heart and soul of who we are that's there and the reason why we exist as a company. So it's really kind of cool. You should check it out. It's worth 5 minutes of your time. And then from here, it's kind of like this feeling a little bit of, okay, we spent all this time to get here. It's finalized, it's public, there, we're done. But it's really not. Like, we're done, like, preparing it, but now I feel like, what I keep telling everybody is, now we finally arrived to the starting line. It's not like we've finished and we're at the finish line. It's like, okay, we did all this work and now we can begin. Kind of like where our company's going from here forward and everything we're going to do. So we're doing a lot of internal stuff. We're going to do up posters and just cool stuff, not like the platitude like, posters like leadership with an eagle flying through. Though we have talked about making up some like fake ones like that based on some inside jokes we have here. We're totally going to do stuff like that. But, just like incorporating all this stuff. Because what we didn't want to do is come out with these values and have them be like, oh, great, okay, and then we kind of tuck them away and never really think about them again. It's really not how it works around here. So we're going to be incorporating them into a lot of what we do around here. It's going to be put into performance evaluations, and it's going to be integrated into our interview process and all that stuff. We're going to talk about it every week in our weekly meetings. So the conversation will continue, just like right now. I'm talking about it with you. We're going to continue the conversation. You're going to post in the comments on YouTube or on Ink Nouveau or whatever. I'm going to reply back to you. We'll keep the conversation going. That's how this thing works. It's an engagement kind of thing. So anyway, that said, we're going to make next week's topic for Q&A on the Goulet values. Rachel and I are going to do it together, but I also want other people on our team to be in that video. So if you've got any questions about anybody in our team, you can go and look on the bios. We have an About Us page with a bio of every single person in our company. You can ask random questions to random people if you want. I can't guarantee we're going to be able to get everybody who gets a question on here, but if you got good questions and we can round anybody up and they're comfortable being on video, some people aren't, then that's cool. We'll try and get them on here for next week's Q&A. So that said, got a bunch of questions for this week, and I started my video a little bit late, so I'm going to run into my own lunchtime, so I'm going to be getting hungry towards the end of this, and I may or may not start talking faster as we get towards the end of this thing so that I can get my giant salad that I like to eat for lunch every day in my belly. All right, first question. Mary B on Facebook said, having just gotten the Goulet Pen flush, syringe, and blower, I'm assuming you mean the bulb syringe, how best to clean and refill a piston-filled pen? I know how to use the cleaning stuff with the twist converters, but I have several piston types where I can't see the contents of the barrel or inkwell. Yes, when you're using a piston fill pen like this here, I've got a TWSBI 580 all. So when you're using a piston fill pen like this, it's essentially the same concept as a twist converter, except the converter part, the twist, piston mechanism, is built into the pen instead of in a converter, which, oh shoot, I don't even have one around here. Do I have one? Hang on, give me a second. Yeah, here we go. So a converter, like I have in this, vanishing point, is the same kind of concept, right? So you've got a twist piston that moves up and down, except on the TWSBI, it's built in because it's a piston mechanism. So it's a very similar kind of thing, but they call this a converter because you can accept cartridges or a converter for bottled ink into this pen. So it's really easy when you're cleaning a pen with a converter because you can just remove the converter, clean that on its own, but then you can take something like a bulb syringe, you can stick it in the back and flush this thing straight through. You get like one bulb syringe's worth of water and flush it through here, and the sucker's gonna be clean. It's gonna take you like 10 seconds. It's glorious. It's like the best trick I've ever discovered with fountain pens, right there. But with a piston, you can't really do that because the thing's all built in. There's no like converter thing to be able to pull out of there. So there's a couple different options for you. Really the main one is pretty much you just screw and unscrew. You're just moving the piston up and down constantly in the water, and it's pushing out water. The problem is you're sucking in dirty water, you're pushing out dirty water, sucking in dirty water, pushing out dirty water. And it's gonna take you a while to really get the thing clean. And that's okay if you're gonna be reusing it with the same ink. You're just doing an intermittent cleaning every 3 or 4 weeks or whatever to kind of just flush out the gunk. And then you don't have to do like a completely thorough cleaning like you would if you were changing colors. But if you are changing colors, you gotta kind of clean it out. Otherwise, your colors are gonna start mixing. It's not gonna be real true. So you gotta clean it out as thoroughly as you can. So there's a couple of different other ways that you could do it. If you have a pen with a removable nib or a removable grip section or something like this TWSBI, you can remove it and you can use an ink syringe. Do I have one? Shoot, I started talking about the ink syringe and I have, give me a second. I've got one over here. Yeah. Here we go. So if you've got an ink syringe like so, then you can fill the ink syringe with water, and if you can remove the grip or the nib or whatever on your pen, you can take the syringe and stick it into your pen, and then you can flush that out. That is one way that you can help with that. That keeps you from having to twist and twist and twist and twist and twist. However, if you can't do that, maybe another option for you, if you have a pen like the TWSBI, you can actually pull the mechanism out of the back of the pen. So if you've got a TWSBI wrench, like so, you just take and unscrew it. You can pull the whole mechanism out. Just leave the mechanism right there where it is, and then you can take your bulb syringe, boom, shoot that water straight through the whole pen with the body and everything, and you're good to go. Essentially what you've done is pull out the piston mechanism like you would have on a converter pen. And then to reassemble it, if you keep the whole thing together, it should be easy to reassemble and then put it back there. Depending on the type of piston pen you have, you may or may not be able to disassemble it like this. And so that might not be an option for you, but either way, those are the 3 options I have for you. Either twist forever, use a syringe to flush it out if you can pull the nib out, or flush it through the back if you're able to do that. But also check out the Goulet Pen Flush tutorial video that I have. That is something that's going to help you out if you haven't seen that already. All right, JoyceAnna D on Facebook. Is there a secret to avoiding inky hands at the end of the workday? Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about that because I almost go out of my way to get my hands inky because it's kind of like a point of pride around the Goulet shop here because we're all messing with pens all the time. So, you know, right now I haven't gotten any ink on my hands today. And frankly, I'm a little bit ashamed of that. But around here, it's like if you're not leaving with ink on your hands at the end of the day, you really haven't been working. You know what I mean? I'm just kidding. But, you know, I know it's different for most people in other work environments where maybe fountain pens are not so commonplace like they are around here. So there's definitely a couple of things that you can do. Mainly when you're going to get ink on your fingers is when you're filling or cleaning the pen. So if you can avoid doing those two actions during the workday, your hands are going to look better. You know, save that for while you're at home or whatever, or towards the end of the day when you're not going to be conducting any of your business anymore, and it would be acceptable. You know, definitely like maybe try to avoid ink colors that look like, you know, blood red, where it might look like you've caused yourself injury of some kind. I've done that before using, you know, like diamine ox blood or something like that, and I'm filling it and get it all over my hands, and then you get weird looks because people think that you've like, you know, just lost a finger or something because you got red ink like, oh my God, and everything. Yeah, so that would be my first tip, is try to avoid the instances where you may be most likely to get ink on your hands during the day. Minimize shaking the pen and stuff as much as possible, just because if you're shaking the pen, you know, like carrying it in your purse where you're flinging it all around, or a backpack or briefcase or something, you know, you're more likely to have ink that might come out of the pen, splatter into the cap, get on the grip of the pen, and then just in normal use when you go to use it, you might get ink on your fingers. That, you know, depending on the situation, that may be hard to avoid. Along that same vein of getting ink on the grip, if you are going through a lot of temperature fluctuations, like you're traveling and you're constantly getting, and it's really hot outside, and then you come inside where it's air conditioned, and then you leave it on the dashboard of your car where it's even hotter, and then you come inside, you know, that temperature fluctuation will increase and decrease the pressure that's inside the pen, might cause ink to kind of burp out, get on the grip, get on your fingers, and so on. If you are going to be doing any kind of activities where you're cleaning or anything the pen during the day, you could always use like latex gloves or something. I don't know how appropriate that would be at your work setting, but it might be something like if you're filling up your pen at the beginning of the day, right before you're heading out to work or whatever, throw some gloves on or whatever, and then you can fill it. And then if you do get ink on your fingers, it'll be on the gloves and not on your fingers the rest of the day. So hopefully some of that helps you out, JoyceAnna. All right, Brian H. on Facebook. I have a Nemosine fountain pen for a while and want to order another one. Do you have any plans to carry this brand in the near future? So this is an interesting one. We get asked about Nemosine every so often. They're fairly affordable pens. They're not really widely known, but I have investigated them a little bit before. There's only like 1 or 2 places where you can even get them. And so Rachel and I had investigated with Nemosine. We got some samples, we made contact with the manufacturer. And you know, reviews seem to be pretty good for those that have used them. And it seemed like everything was going to be like good to go. Like, yeah, we should totally carry it. We probed a little deeper and tried to find out a little bit more about, you know, the manufacturer and why they were making these pens and what they were doing and what their plans were for distribution and so on. Because we really have, you know, around here at Goulet, we really like to get involved in kind of the deeper aspects of the running of the business, not just, hey, here's a product, we think we can sell it, let's sell it. Yeah, that's an important part of having a viable business, but really, I mean, if nothing else, from the values that we've just put out, you can tell that there's like a much deeper why as to why we're running things, as opposed to there's a market for fountain pens and we think we can sell them. That's really kind of incidental. That's really more of kind of the how we're doing it, not the why. So for us to really partner up and be successful long-term with a company, a manufacturer, a brand, we need to have an alignment of values. I won't go into any specifics. I don't want to give Nemosine a bad name or anything like that, but they just simply have a different way of doing business than what we see. We had a really hard time kind of wrapping our head around who they really were and what kind of their end goal was with developing this stuff. I kind of got the sense that they were manufacturing a lot of different things, not just fountain pens, but getting into other clothing and like cosmetics and stuff. Like, I don't even know exactly, because it's all kind of very ambiguous. And that was really the thing, is we didn't get a real sense of like, who is this company and what are they trying to achieve? And they weren't really like open about sharing a lot of that. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily for them. But for us, we run a very personal business. And so we need to know kind of where you're going so that we can align and get you into the same, into help you achieve your goal as a manufacturer if that's where you want to go. And so for us, it was really kind of just this misalignment of goals and values. And we didn't get a really strong sense that like this was somebody that we could partner up with long term, especially because the brand is not really that well known. You know, think about somebody like Noodlers with Nathan Tardif, right? Nathan has kind of put himself out there a little bit more as far as like what he believes and his ideology behind running the business. We've kind of been able to latch onto that and tell his story and help out. And like that situation has worked out really well because there's an alignment of values in terms of why we are both in business. We didn't see that same kind of alignment with Nemosine. So that really kind of stopped it for us right there. And that was a tough decision to have to make, you know, because we really feel like that they have a product that could sell well. And if you are interested in their product, you know, by all means, go check it out. xfountainpens.com sells Nemosine. So, and I believe they're affiliated somehow. But that was all very ambiguous. That was part of the ambiguity. So, you know, by all means, if you want to get their product, please do it. I'm not going to tell you not to, just because I don't sell their product. But it was really just like long-term strategic growth of the business together. I just didn't see how we were going to be able to do our Goulet thing here without having them kind of sharing in that same goal. So that was really the crux of it. Yeah, and that's about it. So, you know, I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, who cares? You know, I just want a good pen, and that's fine. You know what? By all means, go for it. But for us, you know, this is just kind of who we are and how we do things. So that's a decision that Rachel and I made. Okay, Leslie on Facebook said, will you be carrying the Midori Traveler's Notebook Army Edition? The Army Edition's not really well known, especially in the US, because it's not carried in the US, which is why we don't have it. So it was announced, I think, in early 2013, so it's actually not even that new. But it's really just a traveler's notebook with a stamp of the British Army for World War II, I believe. So it's kind of in honor of the British Army around that time. So it's not really something that's like super relevant in this part of the world where we are, but where, you know, Midori is, makes a lot more sense. So they kind of kept it over there. They didn't really bring it over here. It's not like a super drastic, it's not like the Star Edition that came out last year with the camel color leather, like a different color leather or anything. It was really just, you know, the stamp on it that was the thing. So I guess they chose not to bring it over or whatever. And so I don't know if you can still find them anywhere. I would imagine that you can probably, but we're probably not going to have them here in the US anytime. All right, Kate D on Facebook, how does one fill an aerometric / sac filling pen? I recently got an inexpensive Jinhao that's an aero filler, and I can't figure it out. Help me, Goulet Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. Okay, oh gosh, Kate, if I'm your only hope, oh goodness help you. Okay, so yeah, I can help explain that a little bit. That's why I have my vanishing point. So the vanishing point is an interesting pen because it does not come with an aerometric filler. It comes with a Con 50, you know, piston fill converter with this little agitator in it. That's what's that. That's that shaking noise. If that's driving you crazy, it's a little agitator to help the ink kind of flow through the converter. So yeah, it comes with a Con 50, but Pilot has a Con 20 converter that is an aerometric filler. So what is an aerometric filler? It's basically just a converter that has a bladder inside of it, and you compress the bladder, and that's how the pen fills. That's really about it. The vanishing point does fit the Con 20 converter. It's got a better ink capacity than the Con 50 does, which is why some people like it. You can't see in it. That's part of the problem, is you can't see your ink level. So it's really a trade-off. But anyway, it will fit in here. You got to kind of really push it and jam it on there. That's one question a lot of people ask. So I'm going to go ahead and answer it before you ask it. If you got the Con 20, you can put it on a vanishing point. You just got to give it a nice push and it'll fit. But that said, so you got it on here, how do you actually fill it? Well, the first step is just like any fountain pen, you have to make sure that you're submerging the entire nib all the way up to where it's going to fill. This vanishing point is one where you got to really dip it in there pretty good because the filler hole is right up here. It's usually going to be on the back side of the feed where the nib is meeting the grip of the pen. So this is kind of a different one because the grip's not really a part of the nib unit. It's kind of on the body of the pen, but you get the idea. So here you've got to actually submerge this entire section here before it actually fills anything. So that's kind of step one. You have to make sure you're dipping it in enough. But basically, the idea is you're compressing the lever bar that might be here, or maybe it won't have a lever bar, maybe it'll just be a bladder, but you're compressing the bladder to get all the air out of it. And then you can do that before or after you put it into your ink bottle. But if you're going to be doing it before you put it into your ink bottle, the only reason I don't recommend doing that is because for some bottles of ink, specifically Noodler's bottles, the bottles are really full. And if you are sticking your pen in first and then compressing your bladder, you're pushing air out and you could have spillage or bubbles or whatever, and you could end up with a little bit of a mess. So if you are filling with an aerometric converter, I always recommend compressing the bladder first before you put the pen into your bottle of ink. Then you put it in there and then you let go of your bladder. Well, you should be holding it. You don't want to let go completely like that, but you know, let go of the bladder. I did that for dramatic effect, right? Because you're kind of across the table from me. But you let go of the bladder, still holding onto the pen. You don't want to drop the whole pen down into the bottle, but you're letting go of that bladder, and you're going to want to wait 5 to 10 seconds for that bladder to expand and draw ink up into the pen. So essentially what you're doing, you're compressing that bladder, and then you're putting it in the ink, and then when you're letting go, it's creating a negative pressure as that bladder is expanding, and that negative pressure creates a vacuum which draws ink up into the pen. Now it's not going to draw it all the way up and fill every crevice of that bladder. So you may want to do it a couple of times. So compress it again slowly so that if you have a really full bottle, it's not going to gush out. So slowly, compress it again, let it go. And you're probably going to only be able to fill it, about 80%. That's about the best you're going to do, unless you really want to go nuts or something like that. Or if you have something where it's like an aerometric converter style like this, you could also use an ink syringe to fill the aerometric converter, and then you can just place it onto your pen like so. That's another option. But that is essentially how the aerometric style works. And if you are still confused about that, leave me something in the comments and I'll try and clarify it. But I think I've just about covered everything. And then once you've got it filled to your satisfaction, you pull the nib out of the pen or out of the ink just like you would any other pen, wipe it off with a paper towel or whatever, and then you can go about your business. Okay? Jennifer Z on Facebook. If a screw-on cap on a plastic pen becomes difficult or impossible to twist, is there a lubricant you suggest? So you're talking about, if you have a pen and the cap is really tight or whatever. First thing you want to do is make sure that you're not misthreading it, or check the threading and make sure that there's not any kind of damage or any grit or anything that's kind of causing that friction. Usually if it's a noticeable difference in the way that it's feeling, there's something wrong, because these threads will hold up usually for a really long time, and if they're stripped or misthreaded or something like that, that's a little bit more of a problem, and I don't know that greasing it up would just solve that, but you got to assess your own situation. But if you're just looking for a way to grease it up, the best thing that I know to use would be silicone grease. The same kind of silicone grease that you'd use to grease up your piston, to convert a pen to an eyedropper. That stuff is not going to react with any ink. It's going to be safe for all your pens and stuff. It's food grade. It's safe to get on your fingers. You don't want to necessarily get it on your fingers, which is going to be the tough part about greasing up the threads of really any pen with really any kind of grease, is your threads are typically going to be right at your grip. So if you're greasing it up to smooth out that cap action, that's fine, but then when you go to grip the pen, if you're gripping close and you're not hitting those threads, okay, that might be fine. But like me, I hold my pens a little bit further back, so I'm putting my thumb pretty much right on those threads, so it may be where I'm always getting grease on my fingers. That's not as ideal. Now, you don't need a ton of grease, so you could put a little bit of grease on here and then take a paper towel and wipe off kind of the top of the thread, or really anything that your fingers would be touching, and you could still have grease kind of down in there on the threads, which might still give you a little bit better action on your cap without getting it on your fingers, but you'll just have to experiment a little bit with that. But anyway, you asked me what kind of grease is the best thing. Silicone grease is my recommendation, and it's just so convenient. I have it on gouletpens.com. Of course, got to plug myself there, but if that doesn't work, you could try Vaseline if you've got that laying around. I imagine that would be just fine in that kind of situation. All right, Claire E on Facebook. When will you have more Conrad Flex pens in stock? Tahitian tortoise color in particular. This will help me decide whether to wait or get my second favorite color. Thanks. Man, I wish I could tell you, Cara, did I say Clara? I'm sorry, Cara E. I want to say that I said Cara. The video will tell me when I go watch it back, but Cara. You know, I want to say that I can give you an exact date for Tahitian tortoise, but I honestly can't. We're out of a lot of the Conrads right now. I will say I did just talk to Nathan last night. Finally linked up with him, literally like 3 days. I've been trying to get a hold of him. He's a very busy man. But anyway, so he said that he's been working on getting more pens. He told me he's turned a corner, or he's turning a corner as far as pens go, and we should be better stocked through kind of the holidays this year. He says he's been working on a lot of things. You know, I don't know that most of you realize this, but he's a one-man operation. Makes all the ink, coordinates all the pens, does a lot of the pen QCing and stuff like that. He does all the design. He doesn't actually manufacture all the pens, but he sources all the components from all over the place, has them made, QCs them and everything. I honestly don't know how he does it. He works like insanely a lot. Very busy man. But so he's told me that more pens are coming. I don't know specifically what colors. We usually don't know until we get them. So we place orders and things are back ordered. So we just constantly place orders until they show up. So that's kind of how it works. And that's the way that it's going to work pretty much for the foreseeable future. He's been backed up with ink. He has been working on the new Nippon Sit. I know I keep getting asked about that pen. I'm told like it's so close to coming. But anyway, that pen has been like 4 years in the works, but he's working on them now. He's got them and he's working on them. I don't know how long they're going to take to actually arrive to the general public, but shouldn't be too much longer. I don't want to promise exactly when because who the heck knows? It's been forever already, but just hold on tight. They'll be coming, but that's part of the reason why he's getting backed up on some of the other stuff. All right, Pavel K on Facebook. Which pen would you recommend as a starting one in the nice around $100 category? I already got a Lamy Safari. Okay, cool. Lamy Safari, great pen. Look, if you like that pen, don't feel like you have to upgrade. It's a solid pen. Love it. Have a lot of them. Use them all the time. If you like the Lamys and you want to be able to swap nibs and stuff in between them, an upgrade in the Lamy would be going to the Studio. A lot of nice studios. I like the stainless steel Studio personally. It's got that rubber grip. Nice. That's actually Rachel's favorite pen is the Lamy Studio. The Lamy logo. I actually just shot a video on that. That'll be coming out soon. I did a quick look on the logo. It's super underrated pen. Fairly light, just like the Safari is, but it's aluminum. It's a little cooler looking, a little more futuristic kind of. Really different kind of pen. So that was one, that's not in the $100 category. You know, that pen is not nearly that. It's more like the $40 range, but a little bit of step up from the Safari, but if you don't want to have to jump all the way up, you know, you don't have to. It's just another option. And the Lamy CP1 is kind of in that same vein. It's a little bit more, but kind of in that cool, simple German design, kind of neat. If you want to go with something a little flashier, a little bigger, Monteverde Intima. That's a solid pen. I really like that pen. The acrylic that pen's made out of is just really gorgeous, especially that Volcano one is just so cool. And the Monteverde Impressa too, that one's a metal pen. It's gonna be a little heavier, but also got some cool colors, really just good size, weight, everything. If you want to go a different brand, Parker, the IM or the Urban, that's going to be in there. It's under $100 range. You know, you asked around $100. There's really not that much right around $100 because what happens is you start to get in the pens in the $40, $50, $60, $70 range, and then there's kind of a little bit of an emptiness, a little empty space around $100. There are some pens like the Regatta Sport from Monteverde and some other things that are around $100 like the Invincia, Deluxes and stuff like that. But really, once you start to jump up into the $100, you know, once you're starting to get the 140s, these pens start coming with gold nibs. So it's kind of like when you're already spending, once you cross that $100 mark, unless you got something really cool and unique about the pen, like the Invincia with the carbon fiber kind of thing, you know, then it becomes kind of tough to say what's exactly justifying a steel nib pen in that price range when you can jump up to a gold. So, you know, I'm keeping everything here in the steel nib price range, which is actually going to keep everything more in the $40 to $70 range than it is around your $100 range like you were asking. But anyway, Parker IM and the Urban. The Schaefer 300 is another pretty good one in there. And then the TWSBI's got a couple of good ones. You know, really all their pens are in that price range, but the 580 is popular, the Mini, if you like a smaller version of the 580. So those are just some recommendations that I have for some things that you may like since you like the Safari. All right, David H. on Facebook. Totally random question. Love random questions. What was your major in college? All right, yes. Well, my major, I started out in university studies because when I went into Virginia Tech, I joined the Corps of Cadets. I knew I wanted to do Corps of Cadets, and I didn't really know what my major was going to be. I thought I wanted to be an engineer because I was always pretty good at math, and I liked kind of science stuff. I love building things. I really was clueless. So I showed up to my first class, my first day of college, and they assigned like 5 different books to read, and I looked at them and I was like, F this, you know, so forgive my harsh letters. So I quickly decided I did not want to do that. And so I had kind of more of a business-y kind of acumen. So I was like, oh, business management. Like, I really want to get into the School of Business. Well, at Virginia Tech, the School of Business is not just like, oh, you just get there and decide you want to do it and get into it. No, you have to apply. And in order to apply as a transfer, you have to have some credits already in specific classes with certain grades. You have to apply into it, and then only about 30% of the people that apply into the major actually get it. So I was like, okay, so here I am, I'm in the Corps of Cadets, I'm in the Heidi-Tidies, which is the marching band within the Corps of Cadets. So I'm working insane hours and all that stuff. And when you're in the Corps, you have mandatory study hours from 7 to 11 every night during the week. We had band practices in the afternoon, and we'd have football games and parades and stuff like that we'd be doing. So literally, it's like, wake up at 5 o'clock, do your morning exercises, you know, get your uniforms ready, go salute the flag, you go to your classes all day, you go to band practice after that, then you study from 7 to 11, and then it's lights out and you're in bed. No social life whatsoever. And by the way, we were not allowed to listen to music of any kind. We were not allowed to, we were allowed to talk on the phone, but only like at certain times and stuff. Like, we couldn't just be like chilling on the phone and texting. Well, texting wasn't even really that popular back then. At least I didn't have a phone that did a lot of texting, you know, so that wasn't even really a thing. You couldn't be on like AOL Instant Messenger or anything like that during that time, or at least you know, weren't supposed to be, but people would do it anyway. So it was like, you were supposed to be studying. That was the point. 7 to 11, studying, boom. So for me, I was pretty rigid about that. I was like, I'm trying to transfer into the School of Business. I had my work cut out for me. I had to take all these statistics classes and all these other crazy things. And so I did that, and I studied my tail off. And I was an okay student, but I studied like crazy and would get like B's and B pluses. You know, I was never like that phenomenal of an academic student. You know, I have much more EQ than IQ, so I never breezed through school. I always had to study like crazy. And then I'd be sitting next to like frat guys going to parties and stuff, and my accounting, like financial accounting was the worst. Like, I struggled through that class to get a C, and I was sitting next to like this frat guy who would like tell me about how blitzed he would get every weekend, and then he would come in and ace and get like a 96 on a test he hadn't even studied for. And I'm just sitting there like, I am going to be more successful than you later in life, I promise. I don't know what he's doing now, but, you know, I would say it's worked out okay for me anyway. But anyway, total tangent. So I had to transfer into the School of Business. It was hard, but I got in. So I got into business management. I was going to do the business management with the entrepreneurial minor, right? Or the entrepreneurial focus or whatever, which is kind of funny, taking college classes from tenured professors about how to run an entrepreneurial business. And so I was kind of like taking this advice, and we're taking management classes on like, you know, union negotiation and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is something, but, you know, this isn't really what I'm looking to do, you know. So halfway through my junior year, I discovered there's a program within Virginia Tech called Residential Property Management. It's actually technically within the Liberal Arts College, just because I guess it was easier for the professor who started that program to do it in the Liberal Arts College, less red tape than doing it in the business school. So that's where it started, was under housing and urban development. So technically my degree is like, you know, liberal arts and human sciences and housing and urban development with a focus on residential property management. It's very long. My diploma is like very, very wordy. So anyway, but it's residential property management. It was actually the first property management degree at a university in the US. So kind of neat. And it's more popular now, but Virginia Tech has like the oldest one. It's like 20, at this point, like 26, 27 years old, something like that. Anyway. So great professors there. And the thing that I liked about property management was it was still very business focused. Like, the reason I was able to switch in so late was because I had a lot of the same credits that you already would have needed for that major, but I was able to kind of make up some of the other classes over summer school and taking some extra courses and stuff. So I still graduated in 4 years, even though I changed my major twice technically, but it worked like a freaking dog. It was crazy. Like, there's one summer I took 12 credits over the summer, so I basically just took a whole extra semester over the summer. So it was like 2 straight years of school. It was nuts. I worked hard in school. Anyway, so at that point I switched into property management and I did really well in that program. Had to do an internship and everything, which I had to postpone until after I graduated because I switched in so late. And then like 3 days into my internship, I was like, this is not what I want to do. So I graduated, I had like a name your own price, job offer for a commercial property management company. And I was like, is this really what I want to do? I've never been like super money driven or super status driven or anything like that. It was very much like a money and status kind of job. But I was just like, you know what, this isn't what I want to do. So I actually turned down the name your own price offer, never even gave them a price, and told them I was going to power wash houses with my dad. So that's what I did. I left that, graduated school, and power wash houses with my dad for a couple of years. And then it was through that I started pen turning, and then as a hobby, and then from that, turned that into Goulet Pen Company, making pens full time. Wasn't able to make that work as a viable business, but that morphed into Goulet Pen Company with fountain pens, and voila, here we are 5 years later, the whole story. So that was a very long explanation for that question, but and I don't want to make it sound like I did it all. Rachel, she also went to Virginia Tech. She started out in Mary Washington, was a double major in music and computer science. Very interesting combination there. She did that for 1 semester and was like, this is not the school for me. So she moved back home and did community college for that spring, and then the summer did full time. And then transferred to Virginia Tech. Thank goodness, because we'd been long distance for almost 2 years at that point, and I was like, enough of this. So she transferred to Virginia Tech, and we were both there together. However, I was still in the course, so we didn't have a lot of time together, but that's a whole other story. So then she became a human development major, which is kind of like a social science kind of thing, but she thought she wanted to be like a counselor of some kind or a social worker, but turns out that was not for her. So she actually ended up transferring into the School of Business in business management right as I transitioned out. So we would have ended up being in the same major, but I transferred out as she transferred in halfway through her junior year, and she ended up having a focus on human resources, which is now super relevant for everything she's doing around here because she handles all of our HR stuff here at work. So really just kind of a neat story that we have there, but totally goes to show that like you may not necessarily know what you're going to do in school or even keep the same major or use the major after you graduate, but that's kind of our story anyway. Man, I'm getting hungry and I'm like halfway through the questions. Okay, all right, Louis M on Facebook. How does the fine nib from different brands compare to each other? Do you mind doing a demonstration? I have a couple of fountain pens around, and I'm a big fan of fine nibs, but there's no consistency on the thickness of the line with each different brand. Thanks. Oh man, you are so right about that. It's crazy. Like every pen, not even across brand, but even within different models within the same brand, like they're all freaking different, and that's one of the things that I both love and hate about fountain pens is, it's all personal, it's different, but it's sometimes not very consistent, especially across different brands, especially across different parts of the world where the pens are made. Because, for example, the big kind of distinction when it comes to nibs, especially extra fine and fine nibs, is the Japanese companies grind their nibs finer in the extra fine and fine than the Europeans do. So that's a big distinction that ends up happening right there. So if you go with Sailor, Pilot, Platinum, those are the Japanese companies, versus like Lamy, Pelican, Waterman, whatever, they are going to be ground very differently. Not so much in the mediums and broads. Those tend to be more similar. But in the fines and extra fines, very different. And so I totally feel your pain, and I know exactly where you're coming from. I know you asked for a demonstration. The best demonstration I can give, not a lot of people are aware that I've already built a tool here on gouletpens.com called the Nib Nook. Okay, the nib nook is a tool. It's a comparison tool where we have standardized writing samples where I personally have written with every pen and nib combination that we have on Rhodia 80-gram dot paper and used Noodler's black ink. So the ink and paper and the person writing it are all consistent. The only difference is the pen and the nib. So that is the best demonstration that I can give you because I've done that as consistently as I possibly can so that you can see how one pen writes differently from another. So you can go in there and you can see how does a Lamy steel nib look versus a Lamy 14 karat gold nib look versus a Pelican M400 nib versus, I don't carry the Pelican M400 regularly, but basically every pen that we have that rolls through this place, if we're doing a special order, if it's something we carry but then drop or whatever, we leave it all up in there just to have as many comparable pens as possible. So you can look in there, you can see TWSBI compared to Lamy, compared to Pilot, compared to Platinum, all those different things, and you can see what a fine nib might look like in all these different ones. And you'll see sometimes that a medium on one pen is the same as an extra fine on another pen in terms of how it actually writes. So that is the best tool that I can recommend that you go check out. Play with it. It's a lot of fun there, but also the ink that you're using can make a difference. It's not just the nib that influences how a pen writes, but it's also the feed and the whole setup inside the pen that causes how much ink flows through that can make a difference as well. You can have one nib size, but if a pen is writing a lot wetter, you're gonna have a broader line, even though the nib size is the same. So even within the same pen, using one ink versus another can make a difference in how broad it's going to write. In addition to that, the third factor is the paper that you're using. So if you're not using consistent paper across your different pens when you compare them, you might as well just not even try because the paper can make such a huge difference in terms of how the line looks when you're writing. It can make a difference in the color and the saturation of the ink and everything. Paper is such an overlooked aspect of writing with a fountain pen that you really should start there. Just before you even go crazy looking at nibs and stuff, look at your paper. So, use different nibs and different ink and stuff on different types of paper, and you may find that changing the paper alone, you would be amazed at the difference between writing on a really absorbent piece of like cheap inkjet copy paper and writing on something like a very ink-resistant Rhodia or Clairefontaine. It can literally go from making like you're writing with like a double broad to writing with an extra fine. It can be that drastic just with the paper alone. So I recommend checking that out. All right, CJC on Facebook. Some of us live in dry areas where even 20% relative humidity is considered to be muggy. Even to me, I used to live near the DC. All right, we're in Central Virginia here, and it's like 70% humidity every day in the summertime. I mean, it's pretty muggy. The only time it's muggier is when it's raining. All right, so anyway, your question. This causes a problem with fountain pens. Unless the cap creates an excellent seal, ink soon dry in the nibs and feeds, requiring either a drop of water to rehydrate the ink or cleaning. My Metropolitans, for example, require an exercise session every 2 to 3 days to raise the odds that the ink will flow when I need it. This isn't a problem with my Platinum pens, including the Preppy, even with more problematic inks because of their famous inner cap. I'm curious, what other pens or brands under, say, $200 offer anything near the sort of protection from drying that Platinum does? Thanks to everyone at GPC. The work y'all put in to serve your customers is very much appreciated. Well, thank you, CJ. That is very nice of you to say. We are happy to do that. So essentially what you're asking here is what pens have a good sealing inner cap on the pen. So that's really what's going to make the difference. That's the reason the Platinum pens don't dry out, is because especially the 3776, the Century models with the slip and seal, they tout that it works up to 2 years and with a carbon ink, and you can write with it. The Preppy, even though it's only a $4 pen, that pen does a phenomenal job at not drying out. Really, really good. So you definitely are in the right vein there. So you're going to want to stick with pens that have that inner cap. So pens that have that, like the Pilot Pereira is one, the Pilot Custom 74, love that one. Really any of the Pilot higher end pens are going to have that. The A23, the Heritage 92. Those pens are getting a little pricey, but for just that feature. But the TWSBI pens, they've got that same inner cap kind of thing. So those pens that have that inner cap is going to be right along the vein that you're going to want to go. Trying to think of other ones that have like the best sealing inner caps. Those are the ones that are coming to mind. There's some other little tricks that you can do that with your other pens, like the Metropolitan and stuff like that. One thing you can do is to create a little tiny humidor inside your cap. So you cut up a little piece of sponge, stick it in the cap far enough so that the nib's not going to touch it, and then just get it wet, you know, and have a little bit of wet sponge in your cap. That's going to keep your nib wet for longer, and may buy you an extra week or so, depending on your climate. You know, also, if you store your pens in more of an airtight container, something like a Ziploc snack bag or something like that, it may not be the most attractive thing, but if you're sealing it up and keeping air from really circulating and drying out, if you have it sealed up, it's going to last a lot longer for you. So if you want to keep a pen for a couple of weeks without having to clean it out, storing them in something that's airtight like that might be a better option for you. So that would pretty much be my best recommendation, that, or, you know, just reading reviews and being aware of pens that have that inner cap. It's not anything that I have like as a facet on any of our products or anything like that. That's a kind of a tough thing to have to go in and discover on every pen, but you know, I'll give that some thought. Maybe that would be something that would be worth pointing out on some of our pens. Maybe as a future little baby idea of a future video there of like best, you know, pens to keep from drying out or something like that. Any of you that have feedback though for me about that, because I don't live in a very wet climate here, so it's hard for me to kind of have that firsthand experience. Did I say wet climate? I meant dry climate. If I said wet, forgive me, I meant dry. I say the opposite of what I mean a lot. So if you live in a dry climate and you have experience with pens that are really good at not drying out, please give me feedback. Comment. I would love it. All right, it's looking like my battery is going to die soon. Not super soon. 14 minutes. Okay, I'm good. I'll keep going. All right, Terea P on Facebook. How do you determine which products to carry? Conversely, when do you know to discontinue products? Ooh, now you're getting into some deeper businessy kind of things, which I love talking about, but man, I can ramble. Okay, so I made a few notes here. It's like a paragraph like this. So the way that we operate here at Goulet, you know, we're very hands-on. So it's never just about the numbers, right? We want to get our hands on it. We want to see it. We want to feel it. We want to know, is this something that I would want? Because that is like kind of a good baseline. We handle a lot of different pens, and we can tell from how much we interact with our customers to how much we handle pens ourselves whether something's really good just by messing with it. So that's almost the first thing that we do. You know, basically we wait until we hear about something, read about something, get asked about it. You know, we get asked about a lot of things around here, but if a lot of people are asking about one certain thing and we're like, oh, that is kind of interesting, there's something kind of neat to that, I think maybe we could carry that. Let's go ahead and order a couple of them. You know, usually we'll reach out to the manufacturer and say, hey, we're interested in carrying your thing if it's somebody that we're not already in contact with. You know, hey, we're interested in carrying this such and such a brand. You know, we'd love to get some samples. Can we buy some, you know, of each pen or whatever, or we may go buy them from somebody else who's already carrying them, and just to get some pens in our hands to try them out. If we like them, we're like, okay, do we think that we could sell these? What's differentiating about these? I'll kind of put like my marketing hat on. Like, okay, what's different about these? How's the price point? You know, is this something, what is this unique? How's this going to look with everything else that we're carrying? Do I think that there's people who would really be interested in this? Is it overpriced? Is it this, that, Does it have any unique aspects to it? Can you swap out the nib? Can you do this? So then we'll really kind of dive into it and analyze at a much deeper level. Okay, what is this product? Once we do that, you know, we get our hands on it, we really like it, then we dive a little bit deeper and we look into kind of, once we've made contact with, you know, kind of the manufacturer, distributor, whatever, we dive in a little deeper and we say, okay, hey, this is what we're all about. This is how we do business. How do you guys do business? What is there a values alignment here? What's your goal? What's our goal here? Are we going to be able to help each other? Is this going to be a good mutual business relationship? Because we know from being in business a little bit longer now that having a good product is awesome and having customer demand for something is awesome, but if you really want to have like a long-term growth benefit positive relationship, you need to have alignment of values and stuff in terms of the way that a product should be represented, in terms of the brand and how they want to be represented and what they're trying to do. And, you know, it's all the why behind all this stuff. So the why is really, really important. Not necessarily like, okay, we could get a product, we could start selling some pens, but you know, what happens when there's a quality issue? Or what happens when, you know, there's a particular component of whatever's being made that's no longer made anymore? Are they gonna, you know, do they ideologically believe that this product should exist and they're gonna go source it out or go through whatever means they have to continue to make it? Or is it like, oh, well, you know, we just drew a line and it doesn't really make sense to carry this product anymore, so we're just gonna discontinue it, even though there's tons of demand for it. Like, what, are you kidding? You know, that kind of stuff happens a lot, and making sure that we are working with companies who really value value this kind of like direct customer input that we'd like to give. We're very grassroots around here. So if we have a manufacturer who really values kind of that crowdsourced, input of like, hey, we're on social media, we're on all these channels, we're posting videos, we're doing all this stuff. Like, we're really trying to understand what people want. If you completely ignore us and don't think that any of this information is valuable, there's a little bit of a misalignment of values, and we probably aren't going to work out in the long run. So we try and figure that stuff out ahead of time before we start carrying this stuff, so that we know whether it's going to be successful long term or not. That said, discontinuing is a little bit different. That's a little tougher because it's never as straight, clean, and easy as you might expect. So there's kind of like external reasons and internal reasons of why we may no longer carry a product. So some of the external reasons, right? If the US distribution ceases or it changes hands, that's happened before. Like Kaweco used to be distributed by one company, and then their distributor decided to stop carrying it, or something happened with the relationship there. And then there's a little lapse, and so we're just not able to get the product anymore until somebody else brings it in and starts carrying it again, and then we can set up distribution with them. So that's one example. Or if a company from the manufacturing side decides we're not going to offer this product in the US anymore, we're going to put it all in Asia, or we're going to do whatever, or we're going to change it, we're going to change how it looks in what, that kind of stuff happens. Like Pilot, for example, has the MR or the Cocoon in one country, and they call it the Metropolitan or something. They like change names and stuff depending on all these different reasons, right? So that might be a factor. If something gets discontinued, like if a manufacturer just decides, we're not going to make this pen anymore, it's gone. Well, obviously we can't do anything about that. So that's one reason. There may be price increases that happen for a variety of reasons: raw materials, importing, exchange rates, you name it. It could be any number of things that could cause price increases to happen. If we already feel like a product is kind of at a premium and they announce a big price increase, it's like, you know what, we're just going to throw our hands in. They weren't, if something wasn't really selling that great anyway, we anticipate that with a price increase, it's just not going to sell at all. We'll just go ahead and drop it before the price increase happens. We've done that before. If there's stock issues, like perpetual back orders, even if there's demand for something, if we just never get a supply of it and all we're doing is frustrating people, we may just decide to just drop it because it's not worth the frustration of never having it in stock. Or very rare circumstances, we could get dropped. It's really only happened once or twice, but basically, I think it's only happened once with Sailor. That was pretty famous, a year and a half, 2 years ago. They just kind of like out of the blue just sent us a letter and said, we're not going to have you carry our stuff anymore. And that was rare, but that could be a reason as well, an external reason. So then there's internal reasons, like poor sales. If we we try to carry only stuff that people want. If things aren't selling, we're not necessarily going to try to push something and force it out there if there's not already demand for it. So we may feature it, do a little video or do a thing here and there, but I'm usually only going to do that for stuff where people are already kind of interested and want to learn more about it anyway. I'm not going to take something that there is not a lot of demand for and try to feature it and try to create an artificial demand for something if it's just something you're not interested. And usually I got a pretty good gut feeling about what that is because of how involved we are in here with the community and how much we already know about pens. I can pretty much look at something and say, yeah, that's probably not going to work. Maybe at $40 that pen would sell, but at $75, which is what they're asking, no way. So things like that, it's just, if it's something is just not selling and we can kind of figure out why, it's just like, let's just cut it loose and just not offer it anymore. That's happened. If there's quality issues, like, hate to say it, but we had to do that with our own Monteverde Nighthawk. That was a pen that we collaborated with, but they just had an issue on the manufacturing side of things with doing a matte carbon fiber weave with a matte finish. It had these bubbles that would come up out of the carbon fiber, and you could see these bubbles on the matte finish. And we just, said, you know what? This quality is just not up to our standards. If we can't get this fixed, we're not going to carry this product anymore, even though it was something we really wanted to be successful. Just wasn't able to happen. So that has happened before. There's a host of potential challenges that can happen with distribution. I've mentioned changing distributors and stuff like that. That might be one thing, but internally, it could be a values alignment issue. It could be something about, I don't know. I can't think of specifics. That one doesn't happen a lot, but it could be, if it's something is getting damaged in shipping a lot, or, we're receiving the product and the climates that we're in are so completely different and the product is getting ruined in transit or something like that. That kind of thing doesn't happen very often, but there's another little facet to things that you may not necessarily be thinking about, but that does really impact things. And then the last thing is I wanted to mention is that we really don't discontinue much. Usually it's poor sales. That's kind of the thing. And that just has to do with a lack of demand for whatever it is that we're carrying. And we usually like drag it out before we make that decision. But you know, if we've tried to feature something and it's just not selling, we're not gonna push it. All right. Whew. Man, rolling along here. How much time do I have left? Oh, not a ton. Okay. I had 19 questions laid out. I'm on number 13, but I don't think I'm going to make it to the end. All right. Ravena J on Facebook. I might be able to get through these questions a little faster. All right, I'm going to book it. How do you get an expensive pen serviced that was given as a gift? I was given an Aurora 88, but the piston needs to be replaced. Ooh. I don't have any paperwork other than the booklet I was given with it, but I'm definitely willing to pay for the repair. Help! Okay. So Aurora, you know, well, I can talk specifically about Aurora, but basically it's best to try to find out the retailer where it was originally purchased, because they should be able to help you. Even if the pen was a gift, hopefully they'll be able to track down who it came from or whatever. If you don't even know, like if it was a group gift from like your company or something like that, and you just don't know, then I would try reaching out directly to the distributor or the manufacturer. So for your specific situation, Aurora, they are distributed by Kenro Industries here in the US. So I would contact Kenro. You can, you know, put them into your little Google bar or whatever. But if you go to secure.kenroindustries.com, that is their form for submitting repairs and warranty stuff. So that's where you're going to want to go specifically. But for anybody else, it helps to find out who the distributor is. You may not know, in which case, you know, just email us here, info@gouletpens.com, and we'll help you out with that kind of thing. Even if it's a brand we don't carry, we might be able to track down the distributor, or we're pretty knowledgeable about that stuff. So, you know, please don't pepper us with all kinds of warranty things about pens we don't carry. But, you know, if you do have an issue and you just have nowhere else to turn, you're freaking out, you know, email us. We'll try to help you out as best we can. All right, Alexander F on Facebook. Here's a Goulet question. I really love that you offer these Q&A sessions. Awesome. Happy to do it, Alexander. I got J-Arbon Rouge Hematite, but it doesn't really show the gold sheen when I write with it, only when I put a drop directly onto the paper and then smear it. Same issue with a Lamy Vista and a Twisby. Any suggestions on how to get that sheen to come out? Okay, so I'm going to be doing a whole separate video on Rouge Hematite because it's been very confusing. There have been 3 different versions of this ink, and it's just recently changed to have a little bit more gold sheen. So I don't know how old your ink is. If you have version 2, which if you bought it, you know, maybe a month or more ago, you may have version 2, which does not have as much of a sheen. So that could be part of the issue. It also is probably the paper that you're using. Now, this ink is one that shows more of that sheen the more ink you put on the page. So if you have a very ink absorbent paper, that sheen dies, like it just goes away. And that's even with like the version 1 that had a much heavier sheen. I saw that. So it was interesting. I did some testing on different paper, and it's like on an ink resistant paper, boom, sheen in your face. With an absorbent paper, nothing. Just red ink, which is still a beautiful ink, but no sheen. So the paper makes a huge difference. Also, the amount of ink you put on the page, as you probably already discovered, makes a big difference when you're dripping it versus writing it with a pen. So writing with a wetter pen will get you more sheen that way. Craig A on Facebook, have you considered stocking J-Arbon's metallic ink pads for making two-tone wax seals? We have stocked them. We did a number of years ago. I think we were still in the garage at that point. It's like 3 years ago. We didn't have a great success with it, honestly. I never did a video on it or anything, so maybe that was it, but they were kind of expensive. They were like 17, 18 bucks. And, you know, it's kind of like people that are into wax sealing already is kind of like, you know, an above and beyond thing, but then like doing something special with your wax sealing was kind of like, you know, a fraction of people who would even be interested in that. So it didn't really sell that well. So that would fit into that example of why we drop a product, is because it just wasn't selling well. We could carry it again. There's no really reason why we couldn't. I think they still have it available. Gosh, I honestly haven't even checked in the last couple of years. It's very possible that Exoclair is not bringing it into the US anymore, because if it wasn't that great of a seller, maybe it's not even brought into the US. And my battery is going to die very soon, so I'm afraid this is going to have to be my last question for this week. I'll have to save the other ones for a later time. But anyway, that's it for this week, since my battery is going to die any minute. So sorry about that. If you notice, I've been having battery death troubles lately. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, next week is going to be July 18th, 2014, episode 40. And Rachel is going to be planning on coming back with me. We're going to have a topic of Goulet values. And I would love for you to ask questions that other people on the team could answer. So specifically, I'd like you to ask questions about kind of how we do things around here at Goulet. We're not going to give you proprietary, trade secrets and stuff like that, but there's a lot that we're willing to share about what we do around here. Specifically, I'd love it if you could dive in and have stuff that our other team members can answer, because as you saw in the values video, if you've seen that yet, our team members have a lot of great stuff to add beyond just the normal me talking. So I would love to be able to do that. So if you got any questions, you can leave a comment on YouTube or on Ink Nouveau. You can email us at gouletqa@gouletpens.com. You can hashtag gouletqa on Twitter, or you can leave it on Facebook when we pose the question early next week. So subscribe to me here on YouTube if you haven't already, because I put out great videos like this all the time, and I spend a lot of time doing it, and I don't have a lot of time these days. So I'm really pouring my heart and soul into these videos, trying to make it work. But anyway, even if not, that's cool. I just love that you're sticking with me at the end of this video, and I appreciate that very much. So thank you so much for watching all this stuff, supporting my company, supporting everything we do. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful week, and right on.